Hi all, it's Kat here. Just I guess still in recovery essentially from crisis time, so I can't put together any more visuals on this one, but figured it was sort of important to discuss this because I don't know, something relaxation I guess while we've been on, and also something of an important topic at once. And we could probably use a script, right? Visual backgrounds and all of this, right? Those would all help. But those things are not available because, again, just about getting past figuring things out initially, just stepping out of active crisis mode, essentially. So, this whole, what's essentially happened is one of us, and I'm not naming names because it's, some people know, but, this isn't something for the whole public, for the public internet to be able to hear. But one of us made a very bad call that left us quite seriously in the lurch, essentially. And that left us in the position where we were scrambling to be able to continue, to allow us to continue assurance of a roof over our head, let alone food, access to food and electricity, right? Which, obviously, concerns of electricity is a large part of why we haven't uploaded, as well as obviously reduced access to food, right? Both of those things were making recording much more difficult, or even preparing to do a recording, because, turns out computers eat a lot of electricity, and when you need electricity for your job, you really can't then go using your limited supply on secondary things much at all. So that was part of it, obviously, as well as reduced access to food, right? And very fortunately, right, we have, between reaching out to friends to get help and a lot of scrabbling for solutions, we are at a point where we're going to be okay now, right? We've got what we need to buy the food and electricity we need and pay rent, right? All the things that were worries have been at least temporarily sorted. Those things, that which is all well and good, right? We solved the problem. It took us, half a month of scrabbling, and we barely made it in time, but we did make it, right? And we didn't end up in an overdraft at all, right? And everything got paid for, and we have, we can pay for everything until we get paid. The thing that really needs to be discussed, though, is what you do after something like this, right? Because realistically, part of the reason this happened is a level of self-sabotaging behaviours, right? Is that we do still engage in those in particular ways, right? And recognising those for what, and recognising that for what it is important. And then being able to put in place steps to avoid that in the future, right? So, in this particular instance, right, because the self-sabotaging behaviours around finances, we're going to set in place certain general, system-wide rules and put in place new generalised policies on how money is spent and where money is allowed to go, right? And what we're doing with paychecks from now on to effectively try and avoid this sort of a crisis situation in the future, right? On top of that, we've also taken the action of, as a group decision, right? Everyone agreed to this, or didn't say anything, right? Of seriously limiting the person who made this particular call's access to our finances, right? They have been seriously restricting what they're allowed to do with money and how much money they're ever allowed to spend, without essentially consulting with the rest of the system. Right? They're not allowed to spend that money unilaterally pretty much at all anymore, right? It's only pre-agreed upon expenses, which is obviously a serious difference in how things are done, but feels somewhat necessary given what has happened, unfortunately. It's not a pleasant thing to have to do, and we don't like restricting anyone's freedom in that way, not within the system, and we don't want to do that externally either, but, this is both a specific measure because we know this person this is repeated behaviour from them, right? Last time it didn't end up in such a crisis, so the actions that were taken were far more limited that time, because the level of crisis was much more limited, right? It didn't go into full crisis mode last time these actions occurred. There was not anywhere near the same level of repercussion last time, essentially. So the actions taken to prevent it in future were much more limited. This time around, however, right, we are doing more to help prevent those actions from occurring by setting stricter limitations on what can be done, on what that person could do, as well as stricter generalized rulings, because those are unfortunately important to have, right? Or have been, or are proving to be important to have. And those are probably what we should have done the first time around, realistically, is actively take the steps necessary to prevent this from occurring in the future and ending up in a crisis, right? So yeah, I guess I don't know if I have a clear message on there for the end of this, other than, I guess watching for those self-sabotaging behaviors and picking up on them early, right? So that you can step in and right the course before it ends up in a crisis. And yeah, the recognition that, you have to remember that you can't help other people with things that you yourself, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You can't help someone else at the cost of your own well-being, right? If helping someone else is going to affect your own well-being, you have to take the step back. And it sucks, and it feels terrible sometimes, right? And it feels like helping other people is, the right thing to be doing, a good thing to be doing, right? And it absolutely is, to a degree, right? And that's the thing that can be difficult to understand and properly accept, is that there is a degree to which helping other people effectively becomes self-sabotage and self-harm, right? And you have to be able to recognise where that line is and not cross it, right? Or at the very least be able to retrospectively look back and go, okay, that was where we crossed the line. We're going to put in place things to stop us ever crossing that line again, right? If you believe simply knowing what the line is enough to stop you crossing the line, and you don't need rules for that, then great. We would expect a need for rules, but obviously we can't be certain. We don't know what you would need in your system, but, we have seen that recognising what the line is not enough for us, so we're setting in place more specific rules to prevent it in the future in this particular instance, and are, in this particular behaviour pattern, and are going to set in place further guidelines, essentially, on what else might need to be done to prevent this in the, as well as, starting to watch out more significantly for other potentially behaviours of the same kind, so that we can more easily intervene at an earlier stage as a system, rather than effectively depending on single-person judgment, which is very easy to be crowded, unfortunately. Clouded, that's the word I want, not crowded. We work well as a team, and most of us function reasonably well independently when we need to, but all of us have ways our judgment can be severely clouded, And as such, we do need to effectively know when and where those are, right? So that we can, knowing when and where people's judgment can be clouded is obviously very useful, because then you can step in when that's happening, right? Of course, with someone whose judgment isn't going to be clouded by the same situation, can be very helpful, but also just knowing that that's a thing that can happen, right? You can't believe yourself to be infallible, as lovely as that would be. Anyway, I think that's everything. Apologies for the long wait on uploads. But yeah, pulling out of crisis mode, uploading things would have actively worsened, unfortunately. So, yeah, we really couldn't be doing any videos. And cool. Catch you all hopefully next week. This system signing out. Hope to catch you all next week. Please do remember to like, subscribe, comment, especially if you've got any questions you want answered. Be happy to answer them either in the comments or in another video. So catch you all next week.